crypto founders pre-Trump were concerned about going to literal prison. We know Chokepoint will end. That's great, but I want an investigation. I want to find out who did this, who was responsible. I want names. Bitcoin is benefiting significantly from the Trump presidency, but I think people are setting themselves up for disappointment if they bake into the Bitcoin price expectations that the US starts to be a big buyer. Basically, I feel compelled to write when I think everybody's wrong about something. I think I'm right and everyone's wrong. That's why I write things. It's the most high leverage, high impact activity almost anyone can do. And it's so underappreciated. You don't really want to be an index provider for startups. You actually just want a few bets that you really love. The reason stablecoins are up leveling right now is actually because we have more real-time payment systems on the fiat side, so it's less frictional to move fiat into crypto. I think talking about faith and being very explicit about being a Christian is an important thing because it empowers other people to be more public. I'm not at all ashamed of being an evangelist.
All right, Nick, thanks for being here with me today. How's your day been so far? I saw you were defending your charts on Twitter from plagiarism. Tell me about that.
I tweeted a while back that I'm the most plagiarized man in crypto. I know that might sound self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
But my charts really do get ripped off a lot, or people post them without credit. So today the culprit was Brian Armstrong of all people.
Plagiarist.
Well, he didn't know. He cited Visa. Yeah. And it the ironic thing. So this is my stablecoin versus other payment methods chart. I'm sure you've seen it. And Visa made an article about it because they actually didn't really like the chart. They kind of resented the comparison a bit. And so it's very ironic that he cited them for it. But it's okay. I figured out a new strategy. I'm watermarking every chart with my face.
I loved that. The picture was fantastic. It was like you pasted 5 different ways over the chart.
Yeah. We have a new strategy. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do from now on.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, the recent news in your life, I think, is that Mr. Carter went to Washington. So you just got back from a trip there. You met with a bunch of different officials. Obviously, Trump's president now, or will be very soon. So there's a whole kind of Overton window shift in terms of politics in DC and their treatment of crypto. What was your trip like? Who did you meet with? What were the vibes?
Yeah, I didn't want to go. I've been trying to not travel post Singapore. I actually got sick after Singapore. I got some kind of bacterial infection in my stomach. I've been real sick for a month.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to cancel it, and then Trump won the election. And I was like, oh, I guess I have to go to Washington. So we met with a couple of Fed governors. So the Digital Chamber set this up.
Nice.
So shout out to the Chamber. It was very cool of them. And we met with about 16 members of Congress, both representatives and senators. They were pretty much all pro-crypto.
Sweet.
With a couple exceptions. And it was just health check, what's going on, what's the priorities going into the 119 Congress, what's the status of the stablecoin bill, what about the market structure bill, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which we'll get into, I'm sure.
Definitely need to get into that, yeah.
And we were also, the Chamber had written a position paper, which was based on my Castle Islands emerging market stablecoin research, where we found a lot of traction for stablecoins in certain markets. So we were communicating that to mostly pro-crypto members to give them the talking points such that they could persuade their colleagues of the usefulness of the stablecoin bill. So it was a very interesting trip. It was very draining. I don't know how these lobbyists do these. I was totally beat just after 2 days.
Yeah, I saw your schedule on a napkin was just like meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting.
Literally back to back with members of Congress too. You have to be dialed in those meetings. You can't turn off.
Yeah, what would you say your top 3 or 4 hoped for outcomes would be in the first 100 days of a Trump presidency with respect to crypto?
First thing, number one, most important, is ending Chokepoint 2.0. I got assurances from a number of the members we met with that will end.
Sweet.
Trump also himself said it, so,
So you met Trump also?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I'm not even sure they like me very much because I criticized them over their DeFi thing.
Gotcha.
But Trump did say that he would end it. It basically ends day one when you appoint a new FDIC commissioner, a new comptroller. To a certain extent, SEC chair also matters. It looks like Gensler will resign now before even Trump comes in office, or maybe early on. And so it ends, but that's not good enough for me. I want it to, on a go forward basis, be rendered impossible. So I would like either some replication of the fair access rule published under Brooks, under the last OCC under Trump, or actually legislation which says banks can't, the federal government can't impose these kind of mandates on the banks, saying who they can and can't do business with. That would be my kind of stretch goal. So we know Chokepoint will end. That's great. But I want an investigation. I want to find out who did this, who was responsible. I want names. I was told that will happen depending on certain committee assignments. So who gets the chair of the Financial Services Committee in the House? Who gets Senate banking? It's because if you run those committees, you have subpoena power. So whether we get the investigation, we might get it anyway, but it also kind of depends on the assignments. So I'll be able to update you a little bit later. So that's my first thing, because that's the number one problem our startups have.
Right.
Is lack of access to banking in the US. There's no reason they shouldn't have it. The next thing, I think a stablecoin bill would be nice to have, but it could be a bad bill. So we need to make sure it's a good bill.
Has to be the right bill. Yeah.
The Fed's exerting a lot of power over it on the Democratic side. It will be a compromise bill. So the Republicans don't have a huge majority in either the House or the Senate. Gotcha. So they will have to be bipartisan. Right now, the Democratic side's being influenced by the Fed. The Fed wants control over the stablecoin issuers. Right now, the big debate is there a dual pathway to be a stablecoin issuer at the state level and nationally?
That'd be interesting.
The Republicans want there to be a state pathway. So that's the debate. There's also debates over how much surveillance the issuers have to do. I think that'd be nice to have. We don't need to have that. The other thing that'd be, obviously, we're going to get and will be nice will be a new SEC, a repeal of SAB 121, which we don't even need Congress to do that. The new SEC can just do that day one.
Right.
That'll be great because that will let the banks custody crypto and engage in all sorts of crypto activities. And then a market structure bill would also be nice. But also the SEC could just create those rules for what it means to do compliant token issuance.
Hopefully they will. Yeah.
So I do believe that a new SEC will obviously be more dovish with regards to crypto, with regards to tokens. It might take an act of Congress to get a real framework over what it means to issue a token in a pseudo equity like format.
Right.
Those would be my priorities. And then obviously, replacing the leadership at the FDIC, the OCC, SEC.
Right. On the stablecoin bill, that's probably the one that I hear most talked about. The main thing you're looking for there, you're hoping for, is that at the state level, stablecoin issuers could be like certified or legalized, formalized, and also at the national level, like you want to have that separation of central powers. Because
that's how the banking system works. You can charter state, you can charter a bank state-wise or nationally.
Okay.
And that's how stablecoins work. Some stablecoins work on the MTL basis on a state by state. That's how Circle's issued. Some are issued under trust charters, and Paxos and others out of New York are issued on the NYDFS trust. So there are sophisticated state regulators already. And this also keeps the Fed from controlling everything. So the objective is to achieve more decentralization and keep the government from maintaining a choke point over stablecoin issuance. I think it'd be a bad outcome if there are only one or two stablecoin regulators that are nationally regulated. I want a plurality of issuers, plurality of legal regimes and regulators. So that's very important. Right now, there's a Hagerty bill, Senator Hagerty, on the table. That one says when a stablecoin issuer reaches a $10 billion threshold of issuance, it graduates from state to national. I'm against that. I think this $10 billion thing is ridiculous.
Arbitrary.
Yeah. And it also comes from Dodd-Frank. It comes from a law that was passed in 2010. 10 billion ain't what it used to be, man.
It's very true.
It's been 14 years since then. Yeah. In real terms, that threshold is shrinking every year.
100%. Yeah.
So I'm not in favor of the threshold.
It's something you probably have to update in a couple of years anyway with inflation. So it's not a great solution.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem with thresholds is look at the 10K cash transaction report threshold that was installed in 1970, I think, Bank Secrecy Act.
Yeah.
$10,000 then is like $70,000, $80,000 today.
That's crazy.
So, but the threshold's never changed. So it means the value that you have to report for a cash transaction is declining every year in real terms.
It becomes more arduous and more of a hassle for everyday people.
Exactly.
And then what about the Strategic National Bitcoin Reserve? What are your odds on that happening? And then what do you think can be done, or what are the steps you think we need to take to get there, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, I was deciding whether I wanted to fight on Twitter about it today, and I decided against it, and I touched grass instead.
That's good. Let's touch sand.
Yeah. So I don't support it, actually, even though it'd be very financially good for me. You know, if the U.S. government became a buyer of Bitcoin, that's the largest pool of capital in the world, obviously. I don't support it. First of all, we issue the world's reserve currency. So the moment we start hedging and we start buying what we think is the successor monetary standard, that signals a huge lack of confidence in our own currency.
Right.
Which, as good as it would be for Bitcoiners if Bitcoin went up a lot, it would be pretty bad for the world if the foundations of the dollar currency were to be shaken like that.
Yeah.
So the optics of it are not good. And then practically speaking, I think it's going to be very hard to get through. In all of our conversations in DC, it only came up once.
Wow.
With Lummis, who's obviously the sponsor and the author of the bill.
Yeah.
And let's just say I'm very surprised at how overtly explicit and passionate she's been about it in public, given our conversation. With the other members, it didn't come up. The priorities are first, stablecoin, second, market structure. It wasn't even mentioned. And the Congress is so finely poised. The Republicans only have a 3 member advantage in the Senate and a 1 or 2 in the House, really slim.
Yeah.
That they aren't going to be able to just force stuff through. So if it's something that's politically controversial, which I'm sure this would be,
Definitely
using our balance sheet to buy Bitcoin, like people are going to hate that.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to force it through. So politically speaking, I'm bearish on Congress authorizing it unless something changes. The other alternative is that Trump, can find a way to do it without Congress. I suppose there are mechanisms, but
executive order or something.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, the way power really works in Washington is Congress controls the purse strings. So if there is a large, allocation that needs to be made, Congress would want to be consulted in that, and they'd probably really resent Trump going around them.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's willing to spend the political capital to do that. Also, Trump never even really said he intends to buy Bitcoin for reserve.
That's true.
He just said he was going to hold the Bitcoin that they already had.
Yeah. It's a difference for sure. Big difference.
I also have a weird thing, which is careful what you wish for on the reserve. So the way the U.S. government got a lot of the gold, we have like 3.4% of all the above ground gold that's ever been mined. The U.S. government has it. Doesn't really play a role today, right? The way the U.S. government mostly got it was through this executive order 6102. It was in the 30s, right? And private ownership of gold was made illegal at that time until the 70s, right?
They basically forced the sale of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At a certain price too, which is insane.
It was a compelled sale at $35 an ounce or something. And so that's how they got the gold, was through compulsion. So if the government decides they really want the Bitcoin, are they going to buy it, or are they going to compel you to part ways with it, right? So if, let's say the government becomes, fully bowled up on Bitcoin, they're like, okay, this is the next standard. We need the Bitcoin. They might just mandate that you hand it over to them at a certain price. So I don't think we even strictly want the government to become highly intent on obtaining as much Bitcoin as they can, because they have other cheaper means of getting the Bitcoin than just buying it on the open market.
Right.
So overall, I'm cautious on the reserve.
That makes sense. And that's a different take than I would have expected you to come with, but like the way you explained it makes a lot of sense. And
yeah.
Clearly you've thought about it and also talked to the people that would potentially be involved in getting it done. And it doesn't even seem like that many of them are on board, or that it's even that possible to get done. So
the discourse on Twitter is very disconcerting, having been in the halls of Congress mere days ago, comparing what I see on Twitter versus the real conversations, not to pull rank on people or anything.
Yeah, it's true though.
I'm not gatekeeping here. I just
it with the world.
I am baffled by how likely people think it is. So I think it's free money on the poly market, not financial advice.
True.
To take the no side. I don't support it. Bitcoin is benefiting significantly from the Trump presidency. but I think people are setting themselves up for disappointment if they bake into the Bitcoin price expectations that the US starts to be a big buyer. Also, if I'm the US and I want to buy Bitcoin, I would do it quietly. I wouldn't make a ton of noise about it so I get worse execution.
Yeah.
Or like any sovereign for that matter.
For sure.
You would want to start doing it covertly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so on the strategic national Bitcoin reserve factor, I would say crypto Twitter is probably overrating its likelihood of success or importance, given that it probably won't happen. But what about the rest of the things we just talked about? So Gensler leaving or being fired, potential positive legislation being introduced. Like, do you think crypto Twitter is over or underrating the positive impact of a Trump presidency on prices, market structure, all of that?
I mean, it's extremely positive. Nothing even needs to happen for the positive effects to be felt. All that needs to happen is the bad stuff needs to stop. So the boot has been taken off our neck, or it will be, and now there's a big deterrent in the last couple months here. You know, Biden folks aren't going to want to, further, harass us because Trump's just going to be able to roll that back. So the positive thing is the bad stuff is ceasing. We don't even strictly need legislation or anything. We just need rotation in the key financial regulators, which will happen. Mm-hmm. It would all the regulation legislation that people ask for. That's all nice to have.
Yeah.
But the main thing is just let us do business, unshackle us, let us get bank access. Let the banks touch crypto, things like that. That's all going to happen. So that even if we get no crypto ledge, and frankly during the first 100 days, it's not a priority. Let me tell you that the priority is the border. It's Trump's bigger promises that pertain to a large share of the nation.
Right.
Crypto is not a priority. So for the first 100 days, I don't think you'll see a lot of that. I'd be happy to be wrong. I don't think it's going to be a priority of the new Congress.
So you think probably overrated in the first 100 days, underrated in terms of impact over the next 4 years, just given that like we're going from a negative, like detracting, it's like the current legislation and people in power is detracting from the growth of the industry. If we just even get back to baseline and don't even introduce anything new, it's kind of a net win for everyone. Yeah, I mean, this last week or whenever the election was the most important week in the industry's history, right? It was still existential. A Harris administration could have killed forever crypto in the US. I really believe that. I felt it was existential. A Trump win changed the game completely, not just for Bitcoin, but for the whole industry. And what would be nice would be some kind of disclosure regime, pseudo security issuance standard around tokens, which would bring back to life the token market and protect consumers at the same time. Like make token issuers make disclosures the same way that when you want to take your company public, you file an S1 and you can't lie on it. That would be great. That would actually be great. That would revive the moribund DeFi market. Mm-hmm. That would mean that these tokens that could have cash flows can actually embed those cash flows in the token. The governance could mean something. That would be great. I don't know what form it'll take. It could be SEC rulemaking, could be legislation. That's the kind of thing I'd be hoping for. For sure. I mean, even anecdotally, I feel like I've heard of or seen more mentions of tokens or airdrops or points programs in the last week or so, because I feel like especially crypto founders in the US are a little less concerned now. Like they don't feel like they're going to be headhunted. Even if there's no clear new legislation yet, it's like, well, things will likely change. I guess maybe not Shane from Polymarket, unfortunately. But. No, but I mean, it's a great case study, right? Like crypto founders pre-Trump were concerned about going to literal prison for starting DeFi protocols or privacy preserving protocols, right? Mm-hmm. That concern is now largely off the table. I mean, think about that. They weren't just worried about getting in trouble with the SEC. They were concerned with going to jail. Yeah. So this really was existential. People had completely left the US. Everybody was going overseas, especially in DeFi. If you're doing any kind of airdrop, any kind of interesting DeFi thing was overseas. And there was a VPN. It was geo-blocked, right? Yeah. That can now change again. We'll wait to see what Treasury says, what the CFTC says, what the SEC says, but I do believe that's all going to change. For sure. Yeah. In terms of, we don't think that we'll have a whole huge buying by the US government of Bitcoin anytime soon. What about incentives or tax breaks for Bitcoin miners and trying to get more of the Bitcoin mining done in the US? And also a quick question before that is like roughly what percentage is done in the US, if you know?
We don't know for sure.
Okay.
The last time we got data on this was like 21 or 22, and it was like 35, 40%.
Okay.
If I had to guess, same, maybe a bit more, maybe close to 50%.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of different miners, so it doesn't concern me.
Right.
The tax breaks for miners is actually kind of a very local thing. You'll see local jurisdictions will put in long-term tax schemes to encourage infrastructure investment, things like that. So miners are already kind of taking advantage of that. I don't think we need any tax breaks at the federal level. What we do need is the US government to unshackle local industry by creating more energy sources. That is part of the Trump and Republican platform, is American dynamism, growing the energy resources in this country, re-onshoring the industrial sector, allowing AI to thrive, allowing Bitcoin mining to thrive. So that is, they don't have to do much. They just have to encourage more energy development. Yeah. So I do expect that to happen under Trump. But these things take a long time.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, when you start to see Bitcoin as more of a commodity, and then you think about like the solar industry has been kind of incentivized from a tax break or tax credit perspective for a while. I think nuclear has at certain times. So you start to think of Bitcoin as, you know, a commodity and also a very scarce, important asset. And then the production of that could be relevant from like a nation state perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters where Bitcoin is produced, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even if it was mostly mined in China, like, I still don't think the way Bitcoin mining works, it's so globally dispersed, and there's so many different operators, and also the Bitcoin network is so resistant to like 51% attacks. I don't think it actually matters where it's mined.
True.
From a governance perspective.
Yeah.
But it would be a nice thing to have, to say the US is the Bitcoin capital of the world.
Yeah, I guess it's really just kind of a name only, because you can just send the Bitcoins anywhere.
Right.
Immediately. So it doesn't matter too much. Yeah, that makes sense. We talked a bit about the game theory behind, I mean, corporates, but also nation states buying Bitcoin, acquiring Bitcoin. I've thought for a long time that it's going to kind of play out like smaller corporates or smaller countries like Bhutan or El Salvador, whose currencies are maybe kind of hyperinflating or are somehow tied to the dollar, and they don't like that inflation. Like, they'll start to buy some, and then as it works out for them, like the medium-sized countries would maybe do the same, and then maybe the US would be last. But where do you think we're at in that cycle? Like, how have the initial kind of first movers done so far? There's MicroStrategy, there's Bhutan, there's El Salvador.
Yeah, the Bhutan thing is funny. Last year at Token 2049, not this most recent one, but the one before that, I met the king of Bhutan.
Oh, wow.
At a dinner, and he was just a delightful guy.
That's awesome.
I mean, really, like the chillest head of state I've ever met.
That's really cool.
He gave me a bottle of Bhutanese whiskey, which I still have.
Amazing.
And he's like, yeah, we're going to create this special economic zone. We're mining all this Bitcoin. They're doing it with Bitmain, or Bitdeer, I guess, Jihan's company. And just a great guy. And I'm glad to see that, I guess, they're up on their Bitcoin position. I don't know how much they have. Apparently they sent some to Binance yesterday or today.
Interesting.
So maybe they're getting out of the position now. El Salvador, my understanding is that they're kind of doubling down on the Bitcoin strategy. So I would expect to see more on that in the coming weeks. I think the early nations have done well. Of course, Bitcoin's up. It's at an all-time high. So definitionally, you're up.
Yeah. Everyone's up.
But yeah, you know, I don't really have line of sight on who's next. I think people think there's a sovereign bid because, like, the quantum of capital required to move Bitcoin from 60K to, 93K, 90K? It's insane.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Is a lot. So if I had to guess, I would say there's some other sovereign in the market now. I mean, we know, you know, obviously North Korea holds Bitcoin, which they mostly stole from exchanges, right? Lazarus Group. Iran probably has some. Russia probably has some. Venezuela, I think, has some. These aren't like the countries. These are like pariah nations, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we kind of want, you know, more nations that are more, you know, integrated into the international system. So yeah, we'll see who's next. I don't know.
For sure. And then what do you think about corporates buying Bitcoin? Obviously, MicroStrategy is the largest one, but I heard Microsoft is potentially voting on adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet soon. I mean, they do have a lot of cash. they can't print it in an unlimited way like a lot of governments can. But do you think that has a place on a tech company's balance sheet? Do you think we'll see more of that? I mean, last cycle we saw Tesla doing it and a few others, but it might be crazier this time.
For startups, it's interesting because we have a lot of startups in our portfolio where they put some of the balance sheet in Bitcoin. So there's this weird phenomenon where startups get their runway massively extended because they bought some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But then you get like zombie startups that never die because I'm not saying in our portfolio, obviously they're all winners.
Of course.
But, out there are a number of companies that I'm aware of that bought Bitcoin a while back and just hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they have no meaningful revenue or product market fit, they're just permanently alive because they have a ton of Bitcoin.
There was a couple of crypto projects that had DAOs that did that, right? Or like raised in an ICO in ETH and then they just diamond handed the ETH and then now that like they don't even have a working product maybe, but they just continue to operate.
EOS was an interesting one. Block One holds a ton of Bitcoin. What does Block One do? Nothing. They're just a holding company for crypto assets now. Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Bitcoin going up has like good and bad effects. One thing is that it keeps basically half dead startups alive. Yeah. Forever. I don't know. I think if you're in corporate finance, your job is to manage the cash flows and forecast revenue and manage the balance sheet accordingly. I don't think you should be in the business of trading a volatile asset. Right. So we don't actually encourage our startups to hold Bitcoin because it makes it harder to forecast, your runway. And so I don't think that's actually something that you as a corporate finance guy should be engaged with. If you're a prop fund or hedge funds, that's your job, is to trade. If you do corporate finance, your job is to create predictability around the cash flows and the balance sheet and the runway and things like that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, definitely for a small startup, maybe for a Microsoft, it's different because even a small percentage of your cash is a relatively large Bitcoin position. But yeah, you kind of have to, given the volatility, you kind of have to almost not write it off, but assume that money is set aside and just not worry about it too much. Not forecast it into your runway. That's for sure.
I'd be really surprised if Microsoft bought any.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked.
So this is my second cycle in crypto. You've had a few more than I have. 2021 was really, really insane as we're on the cusp of this bull run kicking off with Bitcoin at all-time highs. Just directionally from a high level, do you think whatever we have left of this bull run will be crazier or less crazy than 2021 in terms of price appreciation and the mania that occurs when crypto prices go up? Because 2021 was insane. I mean, we had the COVID thing too, and then all the printing there, but
within Bitcoin or beyond that in crypto?
Think crypto broadly, including all the other sectors.
I don't even believe in cycles, actually. I'm not a cycle believer. Yeah. I think it's illusory, the notion of cycles. I don't think there's any law that says that crypto cycles have to last 4 years or whatever it is.
It is really weird to me that it has lined up like that, and I'm still not sure why. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons, but like, what are the odds? Like
people believe in all this like junk science stuff around halvings, just completely fake. Yeah. I think crypto does correlate with global liquidity cycles for sure, like M2 growth and things like that. We seem to be in a rate cutting environment, but inflation could pick up again. Frankly, I think it will actually. Yeah. So I don't know how much longer we'll be in a loosening environment. I don't know. I'm not a macro guy. I can't tell you. You have to ask Quinn. Quinn will be able to tell you.
Have him on here.
Yeah, he's just my neighbor. Exactly. So I think we could be in a quote unquote super cycle, which isn't to mean that that's like insanely bullish or anything. I just mean that Bitcoin's growth will level off and be more consistent. Yeah. And we won't have a massive 80% drawdown, but we also won't have that 300% appreciation in a couple of weeks either. Right. So that's the regime I think Bitcoin's in. Aside from Bitcoin, I think like the DeFi names overall, like the cash flowing tokens, things like that, there will be more of a value approach to the market. Mm-hmm. Once we've formalized how these things work and if they can give cash flows back to the investors and stuff. Yeah. And they'll be valued on a more of a fundamentals basis. Mm-hmm. And then within the sort of like broader crypto market, I think there's a lot of exhaustion for big L2 and new L1 launches. I think there will be new quality names that emerge without a doubt, but I don't think you'll see these explosive ones like Solana, like going from nothing to something huge really quickly. I think there is retail exhaustion. People are sick of VCs, you know, doing all the early rounds, and then retail gets to buy at a 10 billion or 100 billion FDV, right? And so I think there's less appetite for that. And then broadly, I think there's so much dilution that occurs in the market because, you know, people's ability to create new coins is so easy. You go on Pump Top Fun right now.
This cycle,
So I think that cannibalizes, like, it's very hard for now a coin to get enduring mind share. Because there's just it's so trivial to create a new one. So, and there's so many new L2s, so many new L1s, etc. So I actually don't think you see, you know, this massive across the market outperformance like you saw in 21.
Where there's everything kind of went up. Altogether.
I think there will be winners among the quality names, but I think people will be much more discriminating this time around. And also the large numbers has to kick in. Like, I think we're at all-time high with overall crypto market cap, right? Like 3 trillion or something like that. It can't get that big that fast. The amount of capital that has to flow in to make it much bigger is huge. So because it's already so big, we can't have a 1,000% bull run in a matter of weeks anymore, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know you said you don't maybe believe in cycles, but in terms of, you know, local tops, local bottoms, like what are there any indicators that you're looking at this cycle in terms of like, if I see this and this and this, or any combination of them, it might be a top, like we might locally have topped.
Yeah. Coinbase being the #1 app on the App Store is a pretty reliable one.
That's scary though, because I think we got to 13.
We're close.
Last week.
We're close.
Which is pretty close.
The thing is, people forget about the indicators when they're in the middle of the bull market because they're busy trading and they're not looking at the indicators.
Yeah.
Remember to look at the freaking indicator, okay?
I know. Well, I'm remembering, but I'm almost like not wanting to see what I'm seeing. Because if it's already at 13, I mean, like if Bitcoin goes to 95 or 100K, it'll probably be top 10. And
maybe we're due for a breather, you know?
Yeah.
What else? For Bitcoin, I like MVRV, which is a ratio that actually originally I came up with, believe it or not.
Let's go.
Which is market value to realized value. Realized cap of Bitcoin is like you look at all the coins' value based on when they last moved.
Right.
And then you add it all up to create an alternative market cap indicator. So then you overlay the market cap on top of that, you get MVRV. We're actually mid-range.
Okay.
We're in the 2 range right now. If we go to 4, that's when we're way overheated. 3.54.
Okay.
So that's when I look at for Bitcoin.
And that's basically like not how in the money, but how much money or how up people are on their Bitcoin
Exactly.
positions. And if they get very, very, very up on those, then they're like more likely to sell.
That's when you get it, like exhaustion. Yeah. I like that indicator. It's always been really good. Many cycles now.
That's one to keep a lookout for. Sounds like. And
Yeah,
there's always like your completely normie friends texting you, what do I buy? There's
a lot of that
That's
happening.
Anecdotal.
People ask me to trade meme coins for them.
Oh man.
I'm not even a good meme coin trader, so don't give me your money.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I think MVRV is probably the one I need to look at that is less obvious, but you know, it's good to layer on to Coinbase ranking.
It's been quite consistent historically.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's talk about career now. So I'm curious, like, at what point did you become obsessed with Bitcoin? Because you've said you are obsessed, were obsessed in the past. Was it before or during your time at Fidelity where this became kind of
way before.
Really?
Well, that's why I joined Fidelity.
Okay.
Because they were one of the very few asset managers at that time that was explicitly pro Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Fidelity had started mining Bitcoin in 2014, 15. Mining it in their own data center.
That's pretty wild.
In Merrimack, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
They still have those coins, by the way. They're up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I joined them, because I had finished business school in 2017. And I was like absolutely adamant that I wanted to work in crypto. But there weren't that many jobs in crypto at that time. Right. Not in traditional. I saw myself going into traditional finance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, can I go work with Grayscale? It was basically the other option at the time.
Yeah.
Or actually, Ryan Selkis asked me to join him at Masari as the first employee.
Wow.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting alternative
For sure.
approach.
Yeah.
But instead, I joined Fidelity. Matt Walsh hired me, obviously, now.
Nice.
We work together at Castle Island.
Yeah.
And my job was to brief the leadership on crypto, basically. Me and Matt would do that every week.
Yeah.
And try and convince the senior leadership, not Abby Johnson, because she was already bought in, but everybody else. Trying to convince them to do crypto. And they didn't have any crypto stuff going on at that time. This was before Fidelity Digital Assets.
Gotcha.
Obviously, long before the ETF came out. Fidelity is the second biggest Bitcoin ETF.
Yeah.
Before the retail platform, before the institutional platform. This is before everything. And we also stood up a proprietary trading fund called NDA, Network Defined Assets, is a pun.
Yeah.
That later became Avon Ventures, if you've come across them.
Gotcha.
Alex Thorne was over there at Avon before he went to Galaxy. So yeah, Matt and my job was to trade this fund, build up the internal competency in terms of utilizing crypto assets. All this infrastructure didn't exist. Fireblocks didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So it was much more complex to from inside a large institution to touch crypto, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
We would give the compliance people absolute fits. We'd be reading out private keys on Zoom calls and stuff, like insane stuff.
Very early days.
And the fund went up a lot, by the way, obviously.
Of course.
And then in 2018, but I was just on a salary, didn't have upside in the fund.
Yeah.
And then 2018, Matt and I were like, okay, let's start our own firm and let's make it venture focused infrastructure. We thought there were a lot of opportunities to build financial market infrastructure and crypto from a startup perspective. And that was the genesis of Castle Island.
Yeah. And then before we get into Castle Island, talk to me about CoinMetrics and maybe like what prompted you to found that. And also how did you realize you were ready to leave Fidelity to go do that full time?
The sequencing is actually a little different.
Really?
So I'd started CoinMetrics when I was in business school.
Interesting.
University of Edinburgh. And I was like trying to do models. I think I was trying to compare the fundamentals of crypto assets to the price. And there was a real lack of data. Like blockchain.info had some good data at the time, but only for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I wanted that for every blockchain. And I went on the Monero subreddit and I met the guy who later became my co-founder at CoinMetrics, who I only knew him by a pseudonym for like the first year that we worked together. And
Crypto.
I would send him all this Monero. I used to be a big Monero guy.
Yeah.
I would send him all this Monero to pay for the servers and the website and stuff. And he did the technical heavy lifting. And I, promoted the website. People started using it organically. It wasn't a startup at this point. It was just a free resource where I would publish the data and people and like all these big sell side Wall Street desks started using them. Like, oh my God, something here.
Should charge them.
And so then I joined Fidelity and I kept running CoinMetrics in the background.
Gotcha.
On nights and weekends.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was strictly allowed to do that. But so I had a second job running CoinMetrics.
Yeah.
And then when we started Castle Island, this is 2018 now, I was like, oh, okay, we have this like website that a lot of people use, which like gives away crypto data for free. Like, I think could be a startup.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we actually formally incorporated it. And, at that point, it was like, well, I have to run Castle Island. I can't do two jobs forever.
Right.
Maybe I could have. I don't know. And then we hired the CEO of CoinMetrics, Tim Rice. And, I sit on the board there, but I don't run it. And
Gotcha.
so, yeah, it's been going for 6 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome that it's still around. Yeah. So Ben Horowitz has this phrase, "we're fucked, it's over," Wiffio, that he talks about in his book about basically like all startups face, a few of these moments. Did you have any of those at CoinMetrics, or was it mostly smooth sailing because the industry was so early and, Bitcoin was up and to the right? Yeah. No?
There's like 30 of those moments.
Yeah. What were like the toughest one or two?
Every single fundraise, I was like, it's over. We're running out of money. It's
runway
over.
Wise, yeah.
Yeah, like every bear market, it's like no one's going to buy this. All of our clients are going out of business.
Yeah.
You still never know. You still never know until you go public. You never know. Like late stage companies fail.
True.
So Yeah, that's like every week basically is like, you know, new
A
emergency.
multitude of Wiffio moments.
100%.
Yeah. How has the like product offering or the customers that CoinMetrics serves evolved over time?
Well, initially it was like it's evolved with the crypto market. Initially it was like these little funds that were trading crypto. Then it was like these hedge funds that were growing. And then it was like the biggest financial institutions on the planet. And I'm incredibly proud that CM was able to stand up this competency and get all of the infrastructure involved, like SOC audits and 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 support and a data center with 3 nines uptime. Like all these things are essential if you're going to serve these large banks and asset managers, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And they were able to do that. And so up level themselves and serve basically all of the big institutions that are in crypto right now. And so it is very institutionally focused now. And I'm not just talking about like proprietary trading firms or hedge funds or anything, but like the biggest asset managers on the planet.
Gotcha. And it's all public blockchains or most that are kind of indexed?
Yeah, virtually every major blockchain. And then there's a big separate business, which is market data as well.
Just like kind of live market data.
Yeah, super low latency.
Gotcha.
Market data. Yeah.
Cool. So for Castle Island, when you're thinking about what to do next, like why did you choose to start a venture fund? What about the venture model appealed to you or called to you and you're like, this is the next thing that I have to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Matt talked me into it.
Really?
I never wanted to be a venture capitalist. I know some people are like just like born wanting to be a VC because I think a lot of people think it's a very glamorous career. It's not.
It's not.
There's a lot of travel. You're traveling all the time. It's depressing. All you do is Zoom calls all day.
Yeah.
For some reason, being a VC is this like very culturally salient thing. I guess it's because they have an outsized microphone. That's just the nature of the business. VCs are compelled to advertise themselves constantly because that's one of the ways you win deals.
It's true.
So that's why they're so obnoxious.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was like work in service of Bitcoin. That was it.
Gotcha.
And I eventually realized through Castle Island I could do that. It also gave me a lot of bandwidth for my research and my writing projects and things like that. So it worked out great. And we were able to direct capital into these causes that we believed in. So it is like Ikigai, right?
Yeah.
The thing you're good at, the thing you want to do, the thing you get paid to do, the thing society wants you to do, I think.
Needs, yeah.
Needs?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if society needs me, but anyway, I'm at the center of some of those Venn diagrams for Ikigai.
That's
so
awesome.
I felt very lucky that I was able to be professionally aligned with what I wanted to exist in the world. So, that was the point of it. And in the early days, at least, we were able to marshal and allocate capital to startups that would not have been otherwise funded. So I feel like we really made a difference. I still feel that way today, but there's just so much capital sloshing around.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many VC funds.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard to tell. But maybe a lot of these startups would get funded anyway. But I like to think that we make a difference too.
100%. Yeah. How big is the firm now in terms of number of employees, roughly?
There's like 9 or 10 of us. You don't need a lot of
No.
you don't need a lot of staff to run a VC fund.
Yeah.
And we like to keep the fund size small, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a risk with VCs, you raise too much money and then you lose discipline, you lose focus, and you start just splashing it without being really careful about where it's going. And then you end up with too many portfolio companies and you can't give them the attention they deserve. So we try and keep it small.
For sure. That makes sense. Yeah. And you know everyone well. And what's the culture like at Castle Island? Like what have you tried to set up in terms of culture and environment there? Process,
yeah, that's actually a very good question. I don't get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to do right by our startups, first of all. So we want to behave with integrity. We don't want to jerk them around or, VCs misbehave all the time.
Yeah.
In a lot of different ways. We have a very serious ethics policy that we abide by. We are certain that there's like insider trading that happens to a lot of other funds, and people like farm airdrops for their like with insider knowledge of what their portcos are going to do. Mm-hmm. That's like strictly prohibited at Civ.
Very extractionary, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of VCs that will like know what the Sybil resistant criteria are for some airdrop for a portco, and then the associates will like farm the airdrop. It's like super nasty, dirty stuff.
And you're screwing over the portco too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because the airdrop's less effective, right? That's just like one way.
Yeah.
Then, you know, there's like the broader idea of a venture versus a hedge fund. With hedge funds, sometimes you have misaligned incentives too. Like the fund will just dump the tokens the instant they get them. With us, it's a long-term model. It's a 10-year fund. You know, it's very long-term. So that's like another reason we're a venture structure.
Right.
We want to have real alignment with the entrepreneurs. But yeah, I like to think it's a culture of excellence over here at Civ. We hire very slowly. We've only hired like 2 associates ever, and it took us years to hire them. So we want absolute top. We want to endeavor to be the best specialist fund in the world.
Yeah.
At least in crypto. And we want to be able to compete at the highest level and win deals against, the very best venture funds. And sometimes we're able to do that.
For sure. Yeah, it's been a 6, almost 7-year journey for you at Castle Island. What's 1 or 2 of your favorite moments like with the team in terms of wins or times you felt like, you know, this is a great culture we've created. This is a great kind of family dynamic, or just a bunch of winners in a room, whatever the vibes were.
When our first startup IPOs, that'll be a good moment, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
So let me get back to you.
Yeah.
Getting over 1x DPI on the first fund was a good moment.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of VCs never do that.
True.
Closing the first fund was a great one. The second fund was a slog to close because it was at a very tough time. Closing the third fund was good. I mean, it's just a very gradual process. It takes years for this stuff to play out. But yeah, I mean, when our portcos have huge wins, those are big wins for us too.
That makes sense for sure. Both from like you feel like you supported that founder perspective, and also just from like a financial return to yourselves and LPs perspective, it's like a big one.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because as a VC, you're basically a cheerleader. Like you're kind of on the side, and it's the founder that's doing everything. But I guess you can steal some of the glory from the founder. Yeah,
I mean, and maybe you're being humble about it, but I feel like a lot of investors, or some investors, can definitely add value, and that's like a very talked about thing. But I think every investor has their own way of doing that based on their personality and their skill set and their network. How would you say you try to add value to a portfolio company, just like as the situation arises, or like where do you try to insert yourself with their permission?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what they want. I mean, it's almost every aspect of running a business we'll get involved in.
Gotcha.
Raising capital, introductions, funds for subsequent rounds, or us investing over multiple rounds, or helping with executive search and talent acquisition, helping with PR messaging, finding a way to structure a message such that it gets out effectively. Right. Strategic decisions, sitting on the board. I mean, there's anything, basically. It's kind of up to them.
How would you say your process has evolved over the 6-7 years you've been there? Your like kind of personal sourcing, due diligence, closing process with portfolio companies. I'd imagine it's gotten much easier in terms of like there's more inbound because you guys have established kind of a name brand, and you yourself have like grown in terms of your career and who you know and how many people know about you. But yeah, I'm curious how you've evolved as a venture investor over that time. Yeah,
I mean, we obviously things have gotten easier as we become a bigger and better known fund. It's easier for us to win deals as we've raised and have more capital to deploy. We've been able to lead more rounds, both at seed and especially Series A. That was the strategy for the third fund. And one thing I've learned is to be aggressive and to show very real conviction as fast as possible to the extent you have conviction. Founders really appreciate that. That's how you win deals. And so one thing I do more now is I try and lead many more rounds, as many as possible. Try and lead. Yeah. Because if you're not leading, you're going to get squeezed out. Most rounds only really have one lead and then maybe a handful of strategics. It's be rare to have like a bunch of funds squeezing in for meaningful checks. Yeah. So that's one thing that we've realized now with how competitive the space is. You have to be super aggressive and really, really fast.
Yeah.
And that's hard because, you need to be on top of it and meet the founder early in the process and then get the diligence done. You still want to do diligence.
Yeah.
So that's something that's evolved. Initially, in the early on, when we were a smaller fund, we would just, we were able to lob in much smaller checks, like 250K here or there. Now it's, the check size like 2 to 20 million.
Wow.
So you need to be super aggressive and leading a larger percentage of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Both from like if you have conviction, basically get size in that startup, but also, like you said, founders appreciate not having to slog through, months and months of diligence to convince you. It's like if you are convinced yourself, just support them early on, and then that kind of word of mouth probably spreads that Nic believed in us when no one else would.
For sure, they like that.
Yeah,
and yeah, you're right. It is like a cliche, but having a more concentrated portfolio is actually what you want. You want fewer names you believe in as opposed to a ton of names you sort of believe. You don't really want to be an index provider for startups. You actually just want a few bets that you really love. So that's kind of what I should have known that at the start, but that's what I learned.
For sure. I mean, you're getting paid to take a good amount of risk, calculated risk, not
take the risks.
Index the whole.
You have to take the risks. Yeah.
In terms of media and its impact on your career, I think it's definitely played a big role, and we've talked about this before, but you've always been an avid kind of researcher, writer. You've had your own podcast for years now. I think you're on 500 or 600 episodes, and you've done plenty of appearances on podcasts and kind of news and TV outlets. Was that, very organic from the start in terms of just you took the opportunities that were given to you and then you realized the power of media to build your career and build a fund after, or was it kind of by design from the beginning and you realized it's good to get my thoughts and my voice out there and it will help me?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to build a venture fund. One is to be a former founder and have a great network. Mm-hmm. And then you just get deal flow like that and you have the expertise already because you went through it yourself. I didn't have that luxury. I mean, I had started a company, but I was doing that in parallel while building the venture fund, right? So I didn't have the credential of being a former exited founder at that point. So the other way to build a firm to differentiate your firm, to distinguish yourself from the crowd, is to be very aggressive with what you believe in, to take a message that's different and take it to the world. Yeah. And that's what we did. But it happened kind of accidentally. Like, I just really like writing. I'm a writer. Mm-hmm. Even that's how I became known in crypto in the first place, long before I had Castle Island, right? Yeah. That's how people came to know me. That's how I got introduced to Fidelity, was my master's thesis. I published it online. I was under a pseudonymous account.
Oh, wow.
I had an Anon account in 2017. It was like, the name was like something to do with Monero.
Interesting.
I was like a big Monero guy.
Yeah, I started Anon as well on Twitter.
Yeah, and I DM'd Chris Berniski. I'm like, hey, I think you might like my master's thesis. It was about crypto asset governance because he was the governance guy, crypto governance guy.
Yeah. And
he's like, wow, that's great. And he tweeted it. And then, people found out about me. He introduced me to Matt at Fidelity. That's how I got the job, was writing. And, I just felt compelled to write because I had basically, I feel compelled to write when I think everybody's wrong about something. Mm-hmm. I think I'm right and everyone's wrong. That's why I write things. So I would have done that anyway, regardless of what my career was. If it was like digging ditches, I'd probably still be writing a Substack or something.
Right. Yeah.
But it does snowball. You just have to say yes to things. That's it. You just have to make your own luck and say yes to things, and then it happens. Like, if you have talent and there's quality is there, of course you'll get opportunities.
For sure. So
it was pretty organic. Yeah. I didn't like have a big plan. Like, I want to go on Bloomberg and CNBC and it just happens.
For sure. Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for getting your thoughts out there on a public platform too, right? Like, you could be the most brilliant researcher, writer in the world, and if you just show a few select people, it doesn't really have as much of a chance to spread, right? But if you're posting something on Twitter or Substack or Medium, it can essentially go viral. People can share it with the click of a button.
Yeah, I think creating content, I hate that term, but like, it's the most high leverage, high impact activity almost anyone can do.
Yeah.
And you can really pluck yourself out of obscurity in a moment's notice by doing that. And it's so underappreciated. I know there's like endless amounts of content, but there's a very small amount of quality content. That's the scarce thing, is quality. Sure. Anybody can now use ChatGPT to write a Medium piece or something. But who can come up with original ideas? Who are the true original thinkers in crypto? There's like a dozen. So if you can do that, people will find you and you'll distinguish yourself.
It's a meritocracy. The internet is a meritocracy at the end of the day. It
really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And even today, even with how many people are active in crypto, there's actually more of an opportunity to do that now, I think, because there's so much specialization in crypto. Like you have a specialty.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's hard to be a generalist because crypto is so many different things.
Definitely.
I'm like a generalist, right? But I lose track of these subsectors in crypto.
For sure.
I mean, actually, frankly, most of it, I'm not keeping track of anymore.
It's too much to keep track of.
So I think now that crypto is so heterogeneous, you can totally distinguish within one subcategory. And that's an interesting thing I'm seeing in the fund space as well.
Yeah.
Funds that are now specializing on just one thing, which is very, very different. Like we're not going to think about crypto investors anymore. In 5 or 10 years, no one's going to say I'm a crypto investor. They're going to say I'm a DeepIn investor, or I'm a stablecoin fintech investor, or I'm a ZK investor.
Right.
It's like in the early 2000s, people were internet investors. And now nobody's an internet investor anymore because everything's on the internet. It's like I'm a consumer internet. I'm a consumer guy. I'm a B2B SaaS guy. Whatever. Like there was this specialization that occurred.
Yeah.
Same is going to happen in crypto. No one's going to talk about crypto investing anymore.
Definitely. I think that's the hope for crypto and public blockchains, is that they basically become a new operating system or kind of back-end technology that allows for more freedom and more innovation, but also just gets out of the way in terms of like the internet has become just something that everyone uses and it makes businesses better. And you're not an internet investor anymore. You're a consumer or SaaS or whatever.
It's already happening with stable coins. Now there's a lot of businesses that operate on stable coins that it's not even at all remotely clear that they're using stables.
Right.
So I have this whole thesis around fintech 3.0 is what I call it. So there's like 3 eras of fintech. The first is the PayPal and E-Trade era. Like that was when the internet came out in the 90s. And people are like, oh, you can do bank-like stuff on the internet. Okay. And then without the consumer internet specifically. Then in the early 2000s, you got banking as a service, embedded finance, which was a kind of regulatory innovation. And you got mobile and you got APIs. And then you had this next wave of fintechs, but it was all still built on the correspondent bank system underneath. So you had Stripe and Adyen and Checkout.com and all these guys.
Yeah.
And now, so that was fintech 2.0 because that was pretty good, right? Had some great experiences out of that. But the problem was the banks were not interoperable. You still couldn't easily send funds from the US to the UK, right? Yeah. It's like kind of hard to do. It still has to go through these antiquated banking rails. So now we have a sea change. We have stablecoins, we have blockchains. We rip out the old infrastructure. We put in new infrastructure. Yeah. Global, 24/7, immediate settlement, credible, neutral, less, beholden to regulators, and globally interoperable with these fiat access points all across the globe, exchanges. That's a completely different infrastructure from what FinTech 1 and 2.0 were built on. That's what now we have FinTech 3.0.
Yeah.
And it's built on stablecoins and blockchains and exchanges and mobile wallets. So what's interesting is you're not getting like retail users aren't even touching stablecoins that much. They're just using FinTech consumer apps, mobile money apps that happen to be powered by stablecoins. Right. They're not exposed to it. So that's I think that's like our first best example of like true crypto abstraction, total ubiquity of a crypto product and use case. It's not, the end user is not exposed to.
Yeah, I think the perfect example of that is kind of Venmo. So Venmo's great because you can kind of send money around immediately to your friends. But whenever you go to take that money off of the app, you have to wait at least a couple of days or pay a huge fee and get it immediately into your bank account. So it's like you're still using those old banking rails, like you said.
And it only works in the US, right?
I didn't even know that, but that's a whole nother thing.
I mean, that's the perfect example. And it's crazy because PayPal owns Venmo. PayPal has a stablecoin, but it's still not globally interoperable because it's hard for them to disrupt themselves. But now you get Sling. You know, Sling is a Venmo competitor, but they're built on Solana on stablecoins. And yeah, you can send from the US to the UK. Takes half a second.
Yeah. And there's not really any difference between money on the app and money in your account because both like accounts or both monies rely on stablecoin infra at the bottom. So the settlement is actually instant.
And one thing people don't appreciate about the stablecoin space is one other thing that made the stablecoin sector better is a banking system thing, which is the emergence of real-time payments on the on and off ramp. So like FedNow, Visa Direct, RTP, and then all these different countries have their own different RTP, real-time payments or real-time settlement systems.
Yeah.
What that means is fiat is like the big problem with stablecoins has been that fiat is slow. Stablecoins are fast. When you put them together, you get problems.
Yeah.
Like when you deposit via ACH in your Coinbase account, you have like a 7-day hold, right? Because there's a fraud risk. Or if you use a credit card to buy crypto, there's a hold because there's a fraud risk.
Yeah. Or
it's expensive because of the fraud risk, right? So if you have latency and reversibility risk on the fiat ingress side, it doesn't pair well with the stablecoin, which is a bearer asset. Right. Now that we have slightly better systems on the fiat side, the whole thing works better. You know, so that's something I found very interesting is the reason stablecoins are up leveling right now is actually because we have more real-time payment systems on the fiat side. So it's less frictional to move fiat into crypto because of the on-ramps, the ingress side, there's less reversibility risk because you have like final settlement with the inbound.
No, that makes sense though. I mean, I didn't know that that's why stablecoins have gained more adoption recently, but it makes sense.
Well, that's not the only reason.
Not the only reason, but
that's one thing that makes them a lot better. A lot better.
Yeah.
It's underrated.
And it makes sense though, because you know, you're kind of building this parallel financial system that maybe even works better itself, but it's still tied to the much larger traditional financial system that
you can't get away from that.
Can't get away from it. Not yet.
Yeah, because like if you want to have a fiat to stablecoin to on-chain transaction to fiat flow, the biggest issues, the hindrances are at the on and the off point.
Yeah.
Now that we have more efficiency there, the whole thing works better end to end.
Oh, that makes sense. Last thing on career is that you have a massive Twitter. You're almost at 400K followers on Twitter.
I know. Get me there. What's happening? I've been stalled out for like months.
You got to tweet more often, man. But how do you get to that large of an account? Because you could be a great researcher and writer, and that wouldn't necessarily translate to 400,000 people wanting to follow your kind of off the cuff thoughts on Twitter. So is it a personality thing? Is it like a pace of tweeting thing? Like you used to just tweet a lot and you still tweet a lot. Is it a humor thing? Like what do you think's gotten you there, and what do you enjoy about crypto Twitter?
Twitter is like the best video game of all time. You know?
I do love it.
Like the impressions and the likes are the points. And if you got a lot of likes, you win the game, right? I mean, to me, having a big Twitter is just a byproduct of the fact that I'm obsessed with Twitter. It wasn't something I set out to do. Like there's no number of followers that I want to achieve.
Yeah.
You know, I had 10K followers. I was ecstatic. 400K is great. A million's great. Whatever. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to get messages out there though. And there's a lot of things in my life that happened because I tweeted a lot.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. You can just like make things happen in the real world by tweeting about it relentlessly.
You can just do things.
You can just do things. And that blows my mind. Like the Chokepoint stuff. There were going to be political changes in Washington that occur because I wrote a blog post once. That's crazy.
It's a good thing.
Like I'm just some guy, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just a guy.
Just a guy.
Things are going to change in Washington because I sat down and wrote a blog and tweeted about it a lot. It's insane.
Yeah, there's been two big geographical moves in your life that it seems like have had a large impact. So the first one was moving from the UK to the US. And then also maybe one you don't think is as important, but I think is interesting because I've seen just like pictures of you before and after, and I've only known you while you've been in Miami, but the move from Boston to Miami. So tell me about maybe both those moves and the impact they had on you, and also how much you love Miami now.
Well, so I mostly grew up in the US, not exclusively, but I was kind of all over the place. As people know, my dad worked for the World Bank. I was kind of a diplomat brat. And I get in trouble for that. I think that's so silly. He's retired now. Okay, leave him alone. Yeah. People call me a Nepo baby. I don't think they understand that working for the World Bank means that you're a public servant. You don't earn that much money doing it. Anyway, I had a kind of weird international upbringing, but I went to school in the UK for 5 years, doing undergrad and grad. And then in 2016, Brexit happened. And I was planning on starting my career in London in the financial services industry. I went and interviewed actually at Fidelity International in London. I was like, I wanted to be in equity research. Like they would probably put me on like the telecoms desk or something. Yeah. I'd be covering like, the most boring stocks in the world.
What a different life.
I actually went through the super day and I think I didn't get the job is what happened. I'm very grateful that, I bombed those interviews or whatever. And but Brexit had happened. I was like, okay, well, I think Britain is going to leave the EU and the financial sector is going to suffer because it's not going to be part of the EU. And I was like, at that point, I was like, oh, I also want to work in crypto and I feel like that's in the US and I want to start a company. I want to be an investor and I think the US is the place to do that.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Maryland for a short period of time. That's kind of where I grew up. And then I got the call from Fidelity. And then the next week I moved to Boston on one week's notice. And that's where Fidelity's headquartered. I'd never even been to Boston before. And then I lived there for 4 years because Castle Island is based in Boston. The whole fund is still there. And then in 2021, I guess, summer 21, I was sick of Boston. And it was COVID. And Boston was really, really bleak during COVID. And I didn't want to get the vaccine. Don't tell anyone.
It's true.
So and they were about to impose these rules, like you couldn't go to a restaurant if you didn't have the vaccine.
Just very authoritarian.
And I had been to Bitcoin 2021 in spring 21.
Something good to come out of that conference.
Bitcoin Miami.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, Miami is the most incredible place I've ever seen in my life. It's like the Mecca. And it's free here and you can go to the bar and, people don't yell at you for your COVID card or whatever.
Yeah.
And no one's wearing masks. It's amazing. And my friend Sam Abbasi is actually one of our port co-founders. He showed me around the Gables. I thought the Gables were just the most incredible place. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I need to move to Miami. And I moved to Brickell.
Nice.
I lived in the Icon, which is cool. Like a really obnoxious building to live in, actually.
It's not your speed these days, yeah.
Definitely not. But it was one of the best decisions of my life. And I bought a place here. I think I'm going to be here maybe forever, hopefully.
Love to hear it.
So I feel really politically at home here. Obviously, I don't make it a secret. Yeah. It's not a secret that I'm a conservative. Okay. Right. I think if you read my tweets, you should know that. Florida's a ruby red state. I voted my first election this time around.
Every vote counts. Love to hear
that. Was my first ever vote. I became a citizen, so now I can finally vote.
Oh, nice. Okay. Congrats.
Yeah, I know. And everything about Florida is exactly what I want. The tech, scene here is not very big. Like 1/10 of it's in this room. You know what I mean?
True.
But that's fine. I work remote. It doesn't matter. I can fly to anywhere and lead a startup. So yeah, that was a great call. And this is a good place to be healthy and fit. And that's the most, aside from crypto, that's the most important thing in my life, as you know.
100%.
And so, I mean, there's no better place on earth to be fit and focus on wellness and longevity and all those things.
Yeah, it's easy to be active and outside when it's pretty warm year round. And I think Miami's actually been like America's healthiest city or top 5 for many, many years. So
I believe it.
Yeah.
And everybody's fit. So you feel a lot of social validation in working out all the time.
For sure. It's important.
And there's a lot of boxing gyms here too.
Let's talk about that. What's your amateur fighter journey been like? Now you've got injured a couple of times. You're 1-0. I watched your fight. It was super hype to see you knock that guy out. Where are you at right now in terms of the journey, and what's next? Do you have fights lined up? Are you excited to keep training? Are you beaten up and tired? Where are you at on the whole thing?
I love training, man. I think some people thought I would just quit after the fight.
Yeah.
But I don't think David Hoffman, for instance, actually likes, boxing or MMA. And so he just quit after he did one fight.
Oh, he's done. He's not going to.
I think he's done. Damn. He told me he's done. Maybe I can change his mind.
Yeah.
Kane offered me the fight, though.
Okay.
The guy that Hoffman beat. But he's like really big. I weigh 160 pounds right now.
Yeah.
Kane walks around at like 180, maybe more.
So you're not even the same weight class necessarily, but you would just...
I don't want to come up. I like being slim.
Yeah.
For
sure.
I like weighing 160. But I still have herniated discs in my spine. That's still the case.
And that's from fighting?
I think so. I think maybe I exacerbated it because you put a lot of torsion on your spine. Like when you're throwing
punches.
You're throwing a 2, you're rotating. The power comes from the rotation. So it's a huge rotational forces on your spine.
Yeah.
Also with kicking, like, I train Muay Thai. That puts a lot of pressure on it as well. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm old now. I'm 32,
Starting to feel the aches and pains.
So I'd love to be fit and able to fight. I still train, 4 or 5 times a week, maybe more.
Yeah.
But it's really just a matter of if the body holds up. If so, I would do karate combat again.
When?
There's a Dubai date, I think, in March or April of next year.
Okay.
So I think I didn't show a lot of the skills that I had in my first fight. It's a very short fight.
Yeah.
And then I trained for a boxing match, which I'd pull out because I got injured.
Right.
That was Crypto Fight Night. That was meant to be in Singapore. And I had totally up-leveled my skill base, especially on the boxing front. I mean, I have been sparring with professionals, guys that are going pro, semi-pros. And I wanted to show that. And I'm annoyed that I didn't get to show that.
Yeah.
So I think another karate combat fight could be really interesting. And I believe that I have a completely different skill set from the first time I fought. I want to show that. And I just like the experience. I mean, it's really intense. It's a lot of pressure to train for a fight and know that you get in there with some guy who's trying to knock you out.
100%. Yeah.
But, and here's the funny thing. When I gave my keynote in Singapore most recently, at Token, I felt so calm when I did that. And normally my heart's racing before a keynote.
Yeah, no one's trying to kill you on the stage. So
and it was because now I've like been in the pit with a guy that was trying to literally kill me.
Yeah.
And everything compared to that is so easy. So that's my advice. If you have a fear of public speaking, sign up and do a combat sports event.
Makes a lot of sense.
Because nothing can be as bad as that. Let me tell you, nothing can be as bad as that.
Both physically and kind of mentally, emotionally. Like if you lose the fight, what would it look like? Would it look bad? Yeah. And also physically, like this is going to hurt if I get punched in the face a bunch of times or knocked out. Yeah.
I mean, the pain isn't something that bothers me or worries me. Like I get hit in training all the time. Doesn't matter.
Used to it.
But the fear of embarrassment or humiliation or being literally knocked out.
Yeah.
In front of everyone that on TV.
Click.
With the, it's going to be on crypto Twitter for the rest of all time.
Yeah.
That is scary, man.
It's true.
Let me tell you. That's
and it's
scary.
good you put yourself out there in that way, though.
Yeah, I'm glad I did it. I'm really glad I did it. The benefits were enormous in so many different ways.
I always have a lot of respect for when people very firmly state their favorite artist. And I think it tells you a lot about that person. Mine's Rufus Du Sol, and their lyrics and the sound of it.
Okay,
and
good.
The kind of energy and the vibe that it gives me is just, it always makes me happier and like just feel a lot of love when I'm listening to their songs. I've seen them a couple of times. But tickets,
me too. And I didn't even know who they were
the
times that I saw them. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And what'd you think?
I was like, oh, it's good. It's good vibey.
Yeah. They're coming to Miami May 3rd, so I hope to see you there.
Are we going? Where? Factory Town?
No. I think right outside of Bay Shore, what is that?
Oh yeah,
kind of
yeah.
open pavilion area.
Bayfront Arena.
Bayfront Arena.
Yeah.
They played there 2 years ago. So yeah, they're great. They're mine. Magdalena Bay is yours. You've stated that very emphatically many times. What about the sound or the lyrics or the artists themselves like speaks to you? And you know, how did you first have them become your favorite artist?
I don't know how I discovered them. I think it was just like a random Spotify plays that came up, and I was like, "This is incredible! It's incredible!" I heard their song "Mercurial World."
Okay,
I thought it was just the most incredible song, and I mean, so it's a duo. It's a synth pop. Originally, they were a synth pop band, and it's like a boyfriend and girlfriend. Matt and
cool.
Mika. They're actually from Miami. They live in LA, and they were indie. But now people know them because their newest album was really good and it got a lot of people listen to it.
Yeah,
and they're kind of retro futuristic. So like the sound is kind of a retro sound, like a poppy retro sound. And then in their most recent album, it was really inspired by the Beatles and Pink Floyd. They're probably my other favorite artists of all time. But you know, with a contemporary production to it.
Yeah.
And Electric Light Orchestra, which is another one of my favorite bands, and Genesis. There's some ABBA elements. So it's like all my favorite classic rock bands from like the 70s pulled forward into the present with an amazing, incredible production. And then Mika, the lead singer, her voice is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
She's incredibly talented. So yeah, I don't know. They're my favorite band. I recommend them. They're coming to Miami December 6th.
Sweet.
Come watch them with me.
Excited for that. Yeah. And you met the drummer at your birthday, right? How was that experience? Were you kind of fanboying or were you just like, this is really cool?
Yeah, no, I was totally fanboying, which is funny because people will ask like me for selfies, you know, not to like sound full of myself, but it happens.
100%. Yeah.
For sure. It happens a lot, like in Whole Foods or in airports and on the street. And then I, you know, turned the tables. So the drummer, Nick Villa, was just a friend of a friend, as it turns out. He showed up at my birthday party at Bebe. And I'm like, I was just like completely in awe.
Yeah.
He's an incredible drummer. And now we're buddies, and I have been explaining him how to use a crypto wallet and stuff.
There we go. Onboarding.
So I'm doing the onboarding, and so, you know, maybe I'll get a free ticket or something out of it.
There we go. That sounds like a good trade for sure. So faith has been a bigger part of your life over the past couple of years. And it seems like it means a lot to you. And it's in your Twitter bio. You go to church down here. So what does your relationship with God mean to you these days? And how does it kind of guide your life or guide your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think earlier I said like fitness and crypto were the two most important things in my life. That was obviously false because God is by far the most important thing.
Let's go.
And we go to church together, VU Church.
Yep.
Shout out VU.
Shout out VU.
Amazing church, really incredible church here in Miami. I mean, I've been more explicit about it recently because I think being a person of faith is very underrepresented in the tech community. Yes. Even though Peter Thiel talks about Christianity a lot, I think some of the SF people, when they talk about God, are like not doing it in a sincere way. I think it's like an aesthetic thing for them, not to, you know, be disrespectful or anything, but I think one of my jobs is to open Overton windows, you know?
Yes.
And I think talking about faith and being very explicit about being a Christian is an important thing because it empowers other people to be more public.
100%.
And I know for a fact a lot of people that I know have come into the church because I talk about it all the time.
That's awesome.
And we both know how important it can be in someone's life.
For sure.
So I'm not at all ashamed of like being an evangelist or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, things are not always good. Things are great right now. Obviously, I'm like relatively healthy and, you know, professionally, things are going great. Yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, the week of the election was the best week of my professional career, without a doubt. And now I'm being heard in Washington, and the Chokepoint stuff. Yeah. I'm actually exerting real political influence. For sure. Which is, I would have never thought that would have been possible. Yeah. So things are relatively good at the moment, but they're not always good. Mm-hmm. And I'm not like very public about this, but I've been through a lot of adversity in my life. Yeah. Actually, I mean, the earlier part of this year was incredibly challenging, dealing with the Crohn's diagnosis. Yeah. And trying to rise above that. That really holds you back. For sure. And my faith in God has helped me deal with that situation and other, challenging episodes. And so it helps you deal with the bad parts and also helps you deal with the successes too.
For sure.
Because, one thing Christianity emphasizes is your success doesn't just belong to you. It's given you by God.
Yeah.
And it helps you remain humble even as you experience success.
For sure.
So in both the right tail and the left tail, I think being seated in your faith is enormously powerful and really important. So I can't even imagine what life would be like without having God in my life.
100%. Yeah, and I've really appreciated how you have been kind of an evangelist for it. Like, you have this platform, and it's not like you're forcing other people to do anything or you're telling them this is how you should live your life. It's just like, I'm going to rep how I live my life and what I believe in, and I'm going to put it publicly out there. And just because I have a lot of followers and a lot of people see it, that's a good thing. Doesn't mean you have to, but it's good that you rep it. And I think it has had an impact on people for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't regret being outspoken in my Christianity. And, I was raised an atheist, and I came into it as a solo journey. I wasn't, a cradle Christian. Yeah. I mean, I was baptized, but my family was atheist agnostic. And so it was a solo journey for me as I grew up.
That means even more.
Found the Word and found the Bible, and eventually found a church that I like. And I want to help others that have this realization that God is real and cares about them and wants the best for them.
Yeah.
So to the extent I can do that, I'm glad.
I know general advice is not typically helpful at all, but looking back on your journey, in crypto and in the business world, like what would you say are some decisions or frameworks that helped you do well, or maybe even things that you wish you had decided earlier or done differently? But one thing you've told me before is kind of like this bet on yourself, and bet on yourself even earlier. And it's been maybe even something that you wish you did, is like, you did bet on yourself, but you could have done it a year or two before, and kind of would have accelerated your timeline. So what would you say to people in terms of just kind of general advice on getting ahead and making something of themselves?
I mean, I don't think this applies to everyone, but I do really believe creating high quality content is one of the cheapest and highest leverage ways you can distinguish yourself in the world. So I've always said that. It's still true. I think having like an irrational level of conviction in yourself is definitely, maybe there's like some sample bias, obviously. It's like the picture of the plane with the red dots, Yes. Like there's survivorship bias. Yeah. Because the people that did well in business are the people that went all in on themselves. But I think it's still worth it. One thing I regret from crypto was being too audience captured. So I was audience captured for years by the Bitcoin community.
Interesting.
Like the Bitcoin Maxi community. Yeah. And I was afraid of saying things that would offend them. And because I felt dependent on the impressions. Yeah. And so you have to be willing to fire your fans. Mm-hmm. And I did fire them in 22, I think it was. I had a falling out with the Bitcoiners, and now I have a civil war against them, and I hate them and they hate me. And it's great because I'm free. That moment was probably the most important decision of my career, actually.
Yeah.
Was choosing to distance myself from the hardcore elements in the Bitcoin community and becoming more of a pluralist. And so many entrepreneurs after that were like, Nick, I really respect that you did that. Other VCs too.
For sure.
Because they're very annoying, frankly, Bitcoiners. Very annoying people. Mm-hmm. And they're wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And that was a great, great call. It opened up so many opportunities for me. And also, I just don't believe in Bitcoin to the exclusion of everything else. And I don't think Bitcoin's a religion. Religion is religion.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is not a religion.
For sure.
It's an asset.
Technology.
Yeah. So be willing to fire your fans. Everybody gets audience captured at some point, right? Probably happens to you a little bit. Like you detect that there's things that you say that people want to hear.
Exactly.
Things that you say they don't want to hear, and you're unwilling to say the things they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
So avoiding that means you have to have real courage in your convictions. You have to be willing to say things that are going to get you yelled at. And most people don't have that. Most people have no courage whatsoever. I think that's the most scarce resource is courage.
You tweeted that. Yeah.
It's true. No one is courageous.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a difference. You just stand for something, whether it's unpopular or not.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, even if you get yelled at or whatever, like, you'll be glad that you did it, and that you stuck up for what you believed in. The other thing that's helped me is developing weird obsessions and very esoteric concepts.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is like a replicable thing, but I became obsessed with proof of reserves years ago. Proof reserves.
Yeah.
And that paid off in that it became more ubiquitous throughout the industry. I think I helped. And there was legislation that I was able to write through that. It's like crazy. Like, why are they listening to me? I'm just a guy. And then I became obsessed with Chokepoint, and I developed this incredible sense of injustice around it. And I wrote articles that popularized the term. Trump used the term. I mean, come on, that's insane, right? And now there's going to be congressional investigations. So, like, having these weird, crazy obsessions, you follow that path all the way through when no one else cares about it, when no one else cares.
Yeah.
But you just keep plugging away. I guarantee you it'll bear fruit.
Yeah.
So, and especially if no one else cares. Because if no one else cares, that means you are the world's foremost expert in that thing, right?
It's true. 100%.
If everybody else is interested in the thing you're interested in, you have no edge. But if you're interested in something weird that nobody else has even thought of or cares about, you're going to crush that thing.
100%.
If and when it becomes important.
Yeah, and that's the great part. But that's what I've seen from you is like you've consistently been early to important topics and then like become the expert on them, and then that has kind of like catapulted you in your career even further. Like
or stablecoins is another good example.
Exactly. Bitcoin. I forgot about proof of reserves. Chokepoint 2.0 for sure.
Bitcoin mining was another one that I felt this strong sense of injustice.
Yeah.
That I thought it was unfairly maligned. And for years, I was just defending the Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
And I think I was right. But it didn't really pay off in any way, but I don't care. Because I stuck up for what I thought was right.
Yeah, worst case, you're 6 for 7 on home runs on topics covered. So I think it's a pretty good batting average. Last question for you is, it's been a long, 7+ year journey. You've had a lot of success in the crypto world. What is next for Nic Carter in 2025 and beyond?
Well, we're going to raise and hopefully launch a new fund.
Nice.
So Civ 4. That's also my favorite Civilization game, Civ 4. I don't know if you're a fan of the franchise.
That's great. Great game.
Matt doesn't know about the game, but he
needs to play it.
He doesn't know that's why we're called Civ.
Really? There you go, Matt. Now you know.
Civ 4 is good. I actually didn't want to call the funds Castle Island. I wanted to call it Starling Ventures because I love birds.
Gotcha.
And
what's the name of your Echo?
That's my Echo Syndicate, right? Yeah. But starlings are interesting because they murmurate, so they will fly together in a flock in intricate patterns with high levels of synchronization. Yeah. And it's an emergent consensus, so it's a blockchain joke basically. Gotcha. If that makes sense. So I want to continue pushing the envelope on stablecoins. I want to be the world's #1 stablecoin VC without a doubt. I want to be the unquestioned. You can aspire to things like that, You can, and you can just go do them. You can just do things. Yeah. And so and I want to make sure the investigation at Chokepoint happens. And I'll go to DC again if I have to, okay? Yeah. So help me God, I'll go to DC. I think it will happen. Yeah. But I'll continue making noise about it. And hopefully fight again and get the body fat down to 10%. Nice. Be looking svelte, slim. That's the goal, yeah. And then just, continue my life extension journey or longevity. I don't like the term life extension, but increasing the health span. That's what I was going to say. The health span, not the lifespan. Maybe we're meant to die at 80 years, whatever. Maybe. But I want 80 good years. 100%. And then I have a startup on the side, Chelsea Naturals, Nicotine Mint. And so we're going to sell our first mint next year, me and Megan. Looking forward very much to that. Yeah. Yeah, they're great. I like the mints. Yeah, the citrus ones were actually very. It's our flagship flavor. There we go. Love it. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. This is a great conversation. Really had a blast recording with you in person. So yeah, thanks, Connor. We didn't talk about DPIN, but it's all good. Next time. Yeah.